Welcome to the Veritas Forum, engaging university students and faculty in discussions about life's hardest questions and the relevance of Jesus Christ to all of life.
Thank you very much. I was introduced that I'm Irfan Ahmed, and I would like to thank every one of you who have come here today, and would like to thank the organizers, the Veritas Forum, and Pastor Bernbach for organizing this and giving us the opportunity. I would like to preface my remarks tonight that I'm not a scholar of Islam, but I am someone who models or tries to model his life according to the Islamic injunctions. I've tried to use my iPad, so give me a second till I get it up. Because some of the changes that were made at the last moment could only be incorporated in the iPad. I am moved by the Quranic verse, "Which of the favors of your Lord would you deny?" And I see my life and whatever it entails as a continuum of my faith, my way of life, and it has been given to me, be it the faith, knowledge, family, professional career as an academic, and other financial resources as a trust and a blessing from God Almighty. Granted, not every aspect of my life is perfect, or that I am at the pinnacle of my life. There are good times and there is adversity, and there are challenges in navigating life. However, I'm reminded at every success and at every hardship that this life is a test. And according to a prophetic saying, that a believer is blessed in both conditions. In good times, he is thankful to God for his blessings and bounties, and in hard times, he is patient and perseveres. Practicing Islam to me is a liberating experience, as it is the ultimate problem solver. As I wake up each morning, my duty to God in offering pre-sunrise prayer sets the tone for the day as I leave for work at the campus. As an academic, I am motivated and know that I am fulfilling my religious duty in undertaking my responsibility as a bread earner, using my God-given energies and physical and mental strength in a noble profession, which is learning and sharing knowledge, and pushing the envelope on creativity and innovation in research, education, and training and entrepreneurship. That I am motivated and feel blessed that God Almighty granted me the opportunity to play a role at such a prestigious and world-renowned institution as the University of Illinois in the education and training of the next generation workforce, and help create economic opportunities through research and development and innovation. And that, at the back of my mind, constantly, I'm cognizant of the fact that there are so many more hardworking, talented, and intelligent people here and around the world who may not have had such a chance. Therefore, each day of my academic life, I am humbled by this realization that I have been blessed with this opportunity, and with it carries an enormous trust. For me, the greatest challenge is to try to conduct myself according to the tenets of my religion, Islam. And as some would say, being a role model. But I shudder through my spine when someone mentions that, as I know and that God knows, and God being all-knower, all-seeing, how frail, fallible I am as a human being. It is not always that my life or aspects of my life that I can see would fit as a good role model. But then again, I draw inspiration and strength from my religion. That God is all forgiving, the merciful. That if I mend my ways, I do have a chance. That I have hope. And it is that hope that I latch on to each day. And most importantly, I am reminded that God does not forgive a person until he or she is forgiven by a person whom he or she has wronged. Therefore, in the community and on campus, I try to be mindful that no harm, intentional or unintentional, is done by me to a colleague or a student. And that I express my sincere apologies and regret if and when it occurs. Student-teacher relationship is a very important bond and trust. So what comes first? Religion, family, academic life, profession, or friends? Curiosity is at the heart of Islam. Prophet Abraham is also called the father of the divinely revealed religions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam. In his time wondered why people bow down to idols. This quest for knowledge exists in the religion and inspires many Muslims to pursue academic inquiry. It allows them to ask questions, propose solutions, and innovate. The nature of academia is sharing knowledge, and Islam stresses this in many ways. From asking to read Iqra, which was the first verse revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, to sharing your knowledge of the Quran and religion, to sharing academic knowledge, you will gain reward for doing so. As a researcher and as an engineer, I work on finding new phenomena, building new devices and sensors, some of which may challenge the conventional wisdom. When going about my research endeavor, I am fully aware that Islam does not need scientific endorsement, whereas science can draw lessons from the religion or nature or God's creation. Scientific understanding of phenomena can change and does change. However, religion remains on firm foundation. For me, religion comes first, as it is the roadmap to my success. Family and profession compete for second place. My scientific quest gets its impetus, as is the case with majority of Muslims of today, or of those from glorious past, from the Quranic injunction. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the day and the night are signs for those of understanding, who remember God while standing, sitting, lying on their sides, and give thought to the creation of the heavens and the earth, and say, Our Lord, you did not create this aimlessly. Exalted are you, then protect us from the punishment of the fire. Therefore, it becomes a double whammy, or actually a triple whammy. For me, it helps me fulfill my religious duties, and it helps me understand God's creation. It piques my scientific curiosity, which I enjoy and love. And last but not the least, it helps me pay my bills and take care of my family. The role of Islam is to make a complete person, what some would characterize as insan-e-kamil. Education is imparted to make society civilized, to reduce human suffering, to improve upon the quality of life, wherein money and other financial resources are tools in achieving this goal. Therefore, these are not an end by themselves, but a means to an end. Therefore, the Quran reminds us, say, can those who have knowledge and those who do not be alike? But things do not work out always as I would like or any one of us likes. The scientific results are contradictory to our expectations or hypothesis that the experiment is impacted by external factors which cause delay or loss of valuable data, loss of hard drive, rain, harsh weather in field trials, delays it. How do I navigate this uncertainty? I remind myself of a prophetic tradition: tie your camel and put your trust in God. The verbiage is tawakkal Allah, which means do your utmost to achieve the results you want or expect and leave the rest to God. At the end of the day, failure gives me the motivation to do more or stand up and try again. And I also derive strength from the Quranic verse that God does not test a soul more than it can bear. One cannot expect to have a nation with an excellent science and technology and education, but the society struggles with income disparities, healthcare disparities, and lack of access to clean drinking water, nutritious food, and lack of harmony with nature. These all come into play. That is where I draw my guidance and focus for my academic thrust and curiosity from my religion, Islam, in meeting those challenges. Some would characterize it as socially responsible engineering. A manifestation of my religion is the recent establishment of Avicenna Community Health Center, a social entrepreneurial endeavor inspired by the Quranic injunction: if you save one person, you save humanity. And according to a prophetic tradition, take care of your neighbor. A clinic set up to provide high quality, culturally competent, preventive and curative health care to uninsured neighbors and communities in Champaign County. Currently working in an interfaith academia community partnership. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Burbulis. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you tonight. Let me start with a brief biography. I was mostly raised by my grandparents. On my father's side, my grandmother, my yaya, was very devout Greek Orthodox, and religious icons and prayers and strict punishments and regular visits to church for communion and high holidays were a big part of my youth. During the summers, my sister and I were with my mother's parents, and that grandfather was a minister serving several small churches in East Central Ohio. We not only went to one and sometimes more than one service on Sundays, we often accompanied my grandfather as he visited homes and hospitals during the week as part of his ministry. Later, in high school and college, religion became an even bigger part of my life. My father wrestled with demons of his own, and I was preoccupied by the fear that I would turn out like him. I wanted to be a good person, and I was convinced that only the guidance of a higher power could help me achieve that. I was a double major in college, both philosophy and religious studies, and I suppose these reflected a split within me between a more rational and a more spiritual side. At one time, I was certain that I was going to go to seminary. In the end, the more rational side won out, if you want to put it that way, and religion is no longer a part of my life. I came to realize that you didn't have to be religious to be a good person. And I wasn't always sure that being religious was making me into a better person. But I've often reflected since then on the lasting effect that being religious has had on my personality and outlook. As many students who have sat through my lectures can attest, I still have some of the dispositions and perhaps even the verbal stylings of a preacher in the classroom. I once wrote a fairly secular paper called Jesus as a Teacher. My work as a philosopher of education has many threads, but a central one has been the role of dialogue in teaching. I've done a lot of thinking and writing about how we speak with and listen to each other in educational contexts and elsewhere. I do not think it is an accident that some of the foremost writers on this topic, Paulo Freire and his notions of emancipatory dialogue, liberation, and hope, Martin Buber and his I-thou relation, for example, approach this topic within an explicitly religious framework. Dialogue is about making a connection with others and not just an intellectual connection. So let me talk about one strand of that work which relates to the theme of the Veritas Forum, Veritas meaning truth. I've been working on the idea of truthfulness as a communicative virtue, not just truth, truthfulness. Philosophers often talk about truth as a correspondence between our propositional utterances and a set of circumstances in the objective world. The cat is on the mat is true if and only if there is a cat and a mat, and the cat is on the mat. Speaking the truth in this literal sense is important, and we have a term, lying, to describe the lapse in that standard. A little personal disclosure here, I hate liars. I hate dealing with liars, and it really pushes my buttons when I realize that I've been lied to. I'm very tolerant and patient with many other human failings, but not this one. But there's often something more than just truth-telling at stake. We all have experiences where it's possible to say something that, strictly speaking, as far as it goes, is true, but which conceals additional information or spins the truth or intentionally construes the question in the narrowest possible way. Did you eat the rest of the chocolate cake? Well, I ate a piece of the chocolate cake, but I also started to have a second piece and dropped it on the floor, and the dog ate it, and then there was a little bit left, and I didn't think it was really worth leaving it behind, and so on. I don't tell you all that. Truthfulness expresses a wider virtue than just truth-telling. It looks at context and intention and implied meanings and recognizes that a simple statement of fact often does not address what is really being asked. We have a word to describe the lapse in this standard, and we can take it from Harry Frankfurt's wonderful little book on bullshit. BS isn't lying. I won't keep saying bullshit, I'll just say BS. BS isn't lying, it's all the other little ways that we can mislead, distract, change the subject, rationalize, and pretend to be truthful while we are in fact committing a more serious violation of the truth. Frankfurt brilliantly I highly recommend this book. You don't need to be a philosopher to understand or appreciate this wonderful book. It's available online, actually, for free. Frankfurt brilliantly diagnoses all the different forms of deception that aren't, strictly speaking, lying. BS is, for Frankfurt, a much more widespread and problematic issue, and not just in the political realm, where it seems to be an occupational requirement. It makes me uneasy, and I'll bet it makes many of you uneasy, to realize that hiding behind the truth in the strict, narrow, technical sense is sometimes a dodge we all use. This can be an issue in the classroom. Teacher-student dialogue often presents occasions in which one person or the other has an uncomfortable truth in mind. Too much honesty can be hurtful too. I don't really think student X is bright enough to do well in my class. Do I say so? Do I owe them the brutal truth? Or will it be a self-fulfilling prophecy if I say so? Or, I can't honestly say that I like all my students. I hope I care about all my students. Is that something I need to reveal? And of course, I'm sure many of my students have hurtful truths to say about me that I'm not sure I need to hear either. Truthfulness opens up a new dimension to this dynamic because it brings in those other human considerations, understanding, empathy, tolerance, a sense of the moment, that help inform our sensibilities about the right thing, the truthful thing to say. Truthfulness, then, might sometimes mean saying more than just the literal truth, and sometimes might mean saying less. I don't think it's a good enough excuse sometimes to say, hey, I'm just telling it like it is, man. Do young people still speak that way? And so we enter a realm in which moral judgment and personal sensitivity enter into the equation of truth and how we express it. It's not just a matter of stating propositional facts. In fact, expressing a strict propositional truth is sometimes deceptive. Other times, expressing a strict propositional truth is an excuse for being hurtful, and sometimes knowingly so. Other times, expressing a strict propositional truth is controlling, or manipulative, or defensive, or lazy. If we think these are moral failings, we can't use "it's the truth" as an excuse. That's where truthfulness comes in. Because of where we are tonight, let me give you a concrete instance of this problem that came up as the panelists were planning our comments for this evening. In context of interfaith dialogue, including instances in schools, true believers of one faith or another sometimes say things like, according to my beliefs, people of your religion are destined for hell. Or, my religion tells me that homosexuality is a perversion and a sin. And the defense for saying these incredibly hurtful things is that one is simply asserting the fact of what a religion says, or what one personally believes. It is true, one rationalizes, and one feels compelled to speak the truth. In fact, a few years back, we had a professor of religion here fired for doing just that. I hope that these brief reflections on truthfulness show that the situation is more complicated than that. One can speak the truth but be deceptive in a larger sense. One can speak the truth as an excuse to hurt or insult others, or to posture as superior, or as a know-it-all. One can speak the truth but violate other moral principles like tolerance or concern for the feelings of others. And so I want to suggest, as an invitation to dialogue here tonight, sometimes the truth is not enough. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paula Carnes. As your brochure says, I'm a devout Catholic, but that has not always been the case. For many years, I was an atheist, and tonight I'm going to tell you my conversion story. By way of background, I'm going to tell you a little about my childhood. I grew up in rural New England, in a home that was nominally Protestant. We went to church, I think, when I was 7 or 8. I remember playing an angel in the Christmas play, and that was the extent of really my knowledge of Christianity, was angels. And in high school, under the influence of friends, I moved away from the thoughts of God and became an atheist. I didn't really quite know what I was. It was just a space to be and not to claim to be anything else. And I maintained this up until about 1988. I have a BFA in painting, that's my first degree, and feeling that I wanted to be more marketable, I didn't want to be a starving artist anymore, I decided to go back to school and study art history. So one of the first classes that I took was on medieval art. And the art of this period, as you're probably well aware, is mostly Christian. And I was absolutely fascinated by this artwork. There were images not only of Christ and Mary and the saints and all of heaven. And the class was looking at not just the art itself, but also the time period and the context. And as part of that class, we read this book that absolutely fascinated me. It was by a renowned historian, Carolyn Walker Bynum. Maybe some of you know of this book, Holy Feast and Holy Fast. The full title is The Religious Significance of Food for Medieval Women. And in this book, Carolyn Walker Bynum talks about the lives of late medieval female saints. For their time, these women had it all. Most of them were from the nobility. Most of them were wealthy. Some of them might have been beautiful, and others might have been highly intelligent. But all of them turned away from marriage, turned away from their families to follow Christ. They were convinced that God and Christ were the only truths in their lives. Many of these women were out on the streets, so some of them were in convents, but many of them were out on the streets in more informal movements, helping the poorest of the poor. This class and this book was so powerful to me that I decided to come to the U of I and to do a PhD in medieval art. Now, at this time, medieval art and the lives of these women who I spent so much time with were an academic subject. These were not people that had gotten into my heart beyond being a fascinating subject. So this was So a few years later, after this, I'm here at the U of I, I'm in my studies, and a number of things start to happen in my life. A lot of really profound things happen that I don't have time to talk about tonight. The result of these profound things that happened was this firm belief that God was with me. I had this intense feeling of the presence of God. Now, remember, at this point, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, and therefore, this is a rather strange thought to have after these events. But I couldn't shake this feeling. I had this feeling that the hand of God, in medieval art, God is often a hand. I had this feeling that this hand was cupping me and holding me in a loving way and guiding me. And sometimes I felt like I was just falling and falling, like, you know, like in a dream, and you find, all of a sudden this hand would reach down and hold me. And I didn't know what to do with this. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I thought, they're going to think I'm insane, talking, you know, the hand of God following me around. So I really, and, you know, I was an atheist, so I didn't have a lot of Christian friends because that wasn't really my scene, so to speak. So I didn't have any guides in this, except for the women that I was reading about and studying. They became the people that helped me to understand what was going on. So in some ways they may have caused what was going on, but I don't think so. There were these events that happened that were very separate from this. And so I have to check my notes to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. So I didn't quite know what to do, but I realized, well, you know, so much of what I've been thinking about, and these people that I spent so much time with, these saints, you know, are Catholic. And I felt like this is the direction I should go in. Protestantism didn't really seem to have any connection with me. I didn't really have any connection to other religions, and I felt very much that I should become a Catholic. And I remember asking the secretary in my department, who I knew was a Catholic, I'm like, how do you do it? Like, how do you become a Catholic? I had no idea. And I remember saying to her, well, I have to take a test. You know, I was in college, so I thought that would be a test. And luckily there wasn't a test, because I was really afraid of that. And I went to St. John's, where I'm still a member of that community. And then I joined the church. And it was an amazing thing, because Catholicism was something I had read about in books, and the people I spent time with really came from books. But from day one, it felt so comfortable. It was like the right decision. So, and I should tell you that this is actually the first time I've actually spoken about this in public to anyone. So I did become Catholic, and now I'm going to talk about how that influences my life. Because it's interesting, because it went from it being an academic subject to being such an integral part of my life. And so, of course, it feeds back into my academic life, because it is part of it and grew out of it. I really can't separate the two. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those intersections with Catholicism and academic life. I mean, first of all, it's my love of medieval art. Even though I am not teaching at present, my career has taken me into more administrative roles. I still do teach. This summer I spent a wonderful week at the Newman Center in Chicago with Catholic teachers. So at every opportunity I do try to speak about medieval art, and it's a good thing that we didn't bring slides. We'd be here all night with me talking about pictures. You'd never get home. So I still love to do that. Now, the person that taught the class that we read the Walker Bynum book in was not Christian. She wasn't Catholic. She was a Jew. She felt very compassionate and respectful of the materials that we were studying. So I don't think it's always possible that you have to be a Catholic to understand Catholic art. But I think that I have a unique perspective, because these images so profoundly touched me that I do understand their role. And I feel that I can share that with students and with others that I talk about. So I really am hoping in the next year or two to return to teaching as my administrative duties change a little bit. And in my research, I continue to read on medieval saints and medieval Christianity, and it's a wonderful joy to continue doing that. I tend to focus a lot on literature, which in the Middle Ages is actually both secular and religious together. So if you wonder how an art historian gets to be the head of the Literatures and Languages Library, it's because of that close intersection of art and literature in the Middle Ages. The other way that my Christian life gets manifest is through my position as head of the Literature and Languages Library. I have a staff of about 20, which range from graduate students and undergraduate students and staff. And in the library, we talk a lot about leadership style. They say, what is your leadership style? And not that I've ever said this to anybody, because once again, they might think I'm a bit mad. But my leadership style is very simple. It's the Christian way of life. I think every day of the statement that Jesus did not come to serve, to be served, but to serve. And that is my role, is not to be served by the many people who work underneath me, but to serve. Every day I have many activities that I have to do. I order books with 20 countries in many languages. I have many students and faculty. Like many people, I'm very busy. But the moment a student walks into the library and needs help, everything stops. It may be my lunchtime, I may be doing something that I think is important, but it's people focused. It's the students and faculty that need my help. It is the same with the staff that works with me. If they need my time, that's what I turn to doing. It is so important that I serve them and foster them and give them what they need to fulfill their roles. I think that's enough. God bless.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you, Janine, for your introduction earlier. I appreciate that very much. And let me first express my thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to be with you this evening. We are here this evening to discuss several worldviews and the way in which a specific worldview influences our lives. Most of my professional life has been devoted to conducting experiments in laser physics and atomic and molecular physics, because I am convinced, like so many who have preceded me, that truth concerning the workings of nature can be learned by experiments and tests. The founders of experimental science and the so-called experimental method, including Isaac Newton and other giants of the 17th and 18th centuries, believed that the universe was created by God, who is rational, and therefore it was possible through experiment to learn much concerning how he had made the universe. This process was described at the time and since as thinking God's thoughts after him. Many eminent scientists since that time have agreed with this view. Einstein, Mike is down there somewhere. So, Paul, I did bring some overheads. I hope you'll forgive me for that. Einstein once stated this, that one might say that the eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. I could not agree more. Why should the universe be understandable at all? Why does mathematics, for example, an abstract language, describe and predict physical reality? In short, let me say that I am fortunate to be able to spend my life in science because in the end, it is devoted to systematically learning truth concerning the functioning of the physical world. John Locke, the eminent Oxford scholar, once said this, "I know there is truth opposite to falsehood, that it may be found if people will, and is worth the seeking." Despite the success of the experimental method over the last 3 centuries, I hope that everyone here this evening will agree that the reach of science is not infinite. And we would be short-sighted and, I believe, presumptuous to assume that all that exists lies within the reach of scientific tools and theories. Werner Heisenberg, who received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1932, and is widely regarded as one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, once noted this: that what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Time prevents me from describing for you my spiritual journey in detail, but suffice it to say that these and other considerations persuaded me years ago of the existence of God. Experience has reinforced the conviction that the beauty and the intricacy of the natural world reflect God's intellect and creativity, which dwarf our own. More importantly, I have also come to the conclusion that the worldview described in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, the Bible, is correct. The facts that point to its truthfulness and accuracy consist of internal evidence, external, historical, and archaeological evidence, and the realities of life. With regard to the latter, the Bible describes life precisely as it is, not as we would wish it to be. I would be delighted to discuss these matters afterward with anyone who might be interested. It's my pleasure to briefly summarize the biblical position known to early Christians as the good news. The good news is this: that God not only exists, but that he has intervened in the world he created. He sent his Son, the promised one, whose coming was foretold by Hebrew writers hundreds of years before his birth. You can read these promises for yourself today in the Bible or from the Dead Sea Scrolls on display in Jerusalem and at times throughout the world. Jesus was born during the reign of Caesar Augustus, lived for approximately 30 years, and was executed during the reign of Tiberius Caesar at the hands of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. 3 days after his death on a cross, Jesus rose from the dead in fulfillment of prophecy. In his book, John, who was one of Jesus' disciples, says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will have eternal life." Jesus himself said that he came so that people might live. He stated, "I am the way." I think we have one more, Mike. Jeremiah. "I am the way, the truth, and the life." A statement that would be beyond outlandish were it not made by God himself. My worldview, then, is that these statements are as true as they were 2 millennia ago. As an aside, let me encourage everyone here this evening to investigate the trustworthiness of the Bible and the claims of Jesus Christ. Much of Christianity rests on history, events that occurred in space and time, and if one is willing to devote the time, much of what the Bible claims to be true can be checked. This will have an enormous impact on your confidence in the Scriptures, and John Locke would be proud. When any theory in physics or chemistry, for example, is proposed, experimentalists do everything in their power to generate evidence that either supports or contradicts the proposed theory. In that same spirit, let me urge you to investigate not only the Christian worldview, but all those that are available in what has come to be known as the marketplace of ideas. An inherent characteristic of any true statement or idea is that the more closely it is examined, the better it looks. The reverse occurs if something that is not true is examined closely. As it is scrutinized, it begins to fray around the edges and eventually disintegrates. Reach whatever conclusions you will in the end, but my hope is that you will accept my challenge to investigate these matters more closely. In closing, let me say just a few words concerning the impact of my worldview, the Christian worldview, on my life and work at the university. It must first be said that if the events that I mentioned a moment ago, that is the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, really occurred, these are by far the greatest moments in human history. Everything else pales in comparison. Secondly, for the follower of Christ, serving others, as Paula mentioned, must be near the top of the list of priorities. Jesus said that the two greatest goals of all Christians must be to love God with all of one's heart, soul, and mind, but also to love one's neighbor in the same way as we love ourselves. The Bible asks the rhetorical question, how can one say that she loves God but hates his fellow man? Since God demonstrated his love for the world in the manner I described earlier, it's imperative that I follow his example. The impact of this truth on my life, then, is that as a professor, I'm called to serve and care for my students. That's been mentioned by a couple of colleagues this evening. Not viewing them simply as young people who are here to receive a degree in engineering and move on to a job, it is my privilege to know them and view their lives, their hopes, and aspirations as important. They are junior colleagues and not slaves. With respect to research, it is also a delightful adventure because through experimental science, I am able to see a small portion, small perhaps, but significant portion of what God has so beautifully woven into the tapestry that we call the natural world. This is not a dry, cold, mechanical process, but rather an exciting adventure in which every day brings new insights. No profession, my friends, could possibly be as enjoyable and rewarding as the one in which my colleagues here in the front and I are engaged. Thank you very much.
Now we've come to the moderated discussion portion of our evening. Before we get into our moderated discussion, I want to make a few reminders. One is to fill out the survey cards that are in your programs. Another is that the text message phone number is in your programs. And so when we move into the next section after this of question and answers, we will be pulling up those text messages, and I will be relaying them to the panel. So let's get into our discussion. I noticed in all of these wonderful, very thoughtful comments that there's a lot of shared belief in the importance of caring for others, the importance of being obedient somehow to a higher power. And not all these things are 100% shared, but there's a lot of common ground in the importance of caring for others, the importance of service, the importance of kindness, the importance of obedience, and also the importance of truth-telling, of finding out what is right and what is true. I'm wondering what different panelists think about the extent to which faith is necessary, a certain sort of faith beyond what is seen is necessary for for an academic life of continual service and continual truth-telling and continual morality. To what extent do you think we need a kind of faith or morality in order to police telling the truth and in order to police the continual service that is required to be an academic? So anyone can talk, and really, of course, the goal here is to speak to one another and to speak to the larger group.
Is this on? Maybe I'll start up because I did talk about my service. I mean, I think in many ways, I don't think that the people that work with me, or I should say perhaps work under me, do understand that the reasons that I act the way they do, that my leadership style is a Christian lifestyle. I'm not sure if I feel that it's necessary that they know that. I need to know that, though. For myself, and it also enables me. I mean, there are times when I want to go to lunch. I'm a little crabby, and a student walks in, and I have this moment, and it is Jesus that I think of. It's like, you know what? I don't really get to go to lunch. This is not what I am here for myself, but for the students. So for me, that is extremely important to know, and to know why I am there, because I know that, as Ephraim said, God is watching. I am on a stage and He is my audience. So for me, I don't need to tell students, oh, I'm helping you because I'm a good Christian. I'm helping you because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's my life.
Yeah, I would add to that question is that I borrow this engineering jargon that there's a sensor in each one of us. And so that internal sensor has to be there so that I can hoodwink a person or people or family or supervisor, but I cannot hoodwink God. And so that He's all-knowing, all-seeing, and that my life is structured with that realization. And to you or to my colleague or to my students or to my family, if I pray 5 times a day or fast 29 days in Ramadan or give charity, it does not matter much as how I deal with my colleagues and neighbors and friends. And that is important. And so that is what I see is the manifestation of the required tenets of the religion manifested in my day-to-day life. And so that, again, addresses this issue of that we are constantly in a self-accountability mode, and that we engage each other under that directive. So I don't have to carry my religion on my sleeve, so to speak, but my actions and my words should speak for themselves.
I've been thinking about what I'm going to say because I'm the person up here who doesn't approach these issues from the standpoint of religious faith. But I do think that there's one thing that we all have in common, which kind of almost goes without saying. We're all educators. We're all people who've made our commitment in our lives, religious or not, to the service of other people. To be an educator is to be committed to students, to be committed to helping other people develop and find their life goals and their I'll just say their life goals. And if there's a kind of faith in that, it isn't necessarily a religious faith. I think there's a certain faith that's involved in the commitment to other people and the faith that the students will accomplish certain kinds of things if you play your role as an educator in helping them. So I think you can think about this, or at least I think about this in terms of a faith in people, a faith in human potential. For me, it's not a question of a larger faith, but I'm moved and touched by the other speakers in terms of how deeply they feel the religious origins of their commitment to service to others. I come from a different path, but as I said, in some ways my religious background probably has partly why I followed this particular path too.
I too have been thinking about the comments of others, and in particular the way you phrased the question, Janine. I've known many people in my life who were not Christians by profession, but were wonderful people who were sacrificial in the way they lived, the way they devoted their lives to others. I think what is special to me as a Christian is that the Bible states, and I have sensed this for many years, that God's Spirit lives within those who are Christians and do make, that does make a tremendous difference, I think, in being able to do what does not come naturally. I think Paula was, one of us were talking about feeling crabby, and certainly feel that many times. And so if I only serve when I feel like it, perhaps I would not be as effective in meeting needs of students or colleagues. But God's Spirit motivates us in the example of Christ in having given His life to serve others is a tremendous incentive to service.
Yeah, does anyone else want to respond yet? Oh, I think all of your comments are so great to talk to one another. One of the questions then that I think everyone is beginning to raise then is how without a sort of morality or sort of belief that there should be a common morality, how do we police, how do we get at that continual honesty that Professor Berbulis is talking about, we all sort of agreeing that we need? Or how do we continue that quest for service in those times that all of us as humans don't want to, without that common, or without that belief that there's something more than what we can see? I don't know who wants to answer this, or I don't know. That's a question that it seems people are raising.
I'll just jump in here. I don't want to turn it into an academic lecture. Obviously, there's a whole area of philosophy of ethics and morality that, by and large, tries to base the reasons for being moral not on religious grounds, but on other grounds. The position I'm trying very hard to carve out tonight is that I think that there are other bases for living a good life and for being a moral person that don't require being a religious person. And for me personally, I followed a different path. But I think we have three excellent examples up here of people for whom their religious beliefs undergirds and strengthens their commitment to living a moral life. And if you ask me, I say living the moral life is the most important thing. It's the most important thing. I would put religion under that. But then I'm in a minority here, I'm sure.
No, thank you so much. That's so well put. Other people, I'd love to have any comments, more responses to one another.
Yeah, Janine, I might jump in and say I appreciate what Nick is saying. I think one of the aspects of the Christian life that has meant so much to me, and one of the messages of the Scriptures is that doing what is right most often is not doing what comes naturally, and that's one of the examples we all learn very early in life, that we can't eat as much as what might look attractive at the dinner table. There are many things that we must refrain from, and Christianity says clearly that that the reason for this is that God's Spirit living within us can motivate us to do things that don't come naturally, to serve when perhaps it's not easy to do.
So I'm reminded of tradition that, of course, saying that we have to do the right thing and not the convenient thing. So what is right is important. And so the prophetic tradition is that in case of if you had multiple options, you would take among the allowable options the least the hard one to follow. And so that's the motivation, that if I were to undertake a task, I would do that in that light.
No comment. No comment.
I'll jump in. I'll ask a question. Irfan made a point in his talk that really struck me, and it's something that I've thought about a lot also. So this is not a comment, really. It is a question, which is failure. You talked about failure. You talked about things not working out. You talked about moments of difficulty. And I think a really important question that I think both religious and non-religious people deal with is, what keeps you going past failure or disappointment or difficulty? We encounter this in our lives, and something makes us go on. Something makes us try again. Something makes us, move beyond our mistakes or our imperfection, which is in all of us, to try to do better the next time. And I think that is one of the functions that religion often, in my opinion, religion often serves for people.
Yeah, and I think I alluded to that during my talk, was that it is the hope that I or other Muslims would latch on to, that if you give up hope, then you do not have any trust in God. So that means the point you're making is that that God cannot deliver, which is again contrary to what God is. And so I cannot give up hope in the most adverse of circumstances. It is the hope that I latch on to, and I think my tomorrow would be better than today. And to do that, I do have to be the agent of change. That means that I have to do my part. And I mentioned that I have to tie my camel. That means I have to do the things needed. If I'm not going to study for my test and say God will take care of me, I would not be doing justice and I would fall on my face, most likely. That means that if I have studied and tomorrow, if something befalls me or a professor like yourself gives a big, difficult test and I do not pass, then I can reconcile with the fact that I did my best and it was God's will. And that's what you say, God's will that prevailed. And maybe that part may be for me to see, maybe that was not good for me to pass the test at this stage. Maybe I may have my concepts wrong. I may have to take the exam again or may have to take the course again. And maybe in the overall grand scheme of things, it would be good for me, but I may not have been able to see it at this juncture because I am operating at the micro level and nano level. So, but when I step back, and most of us do that. I mean, when we say, when we look back at our lives and say, what were we anxious about this trivial stuff? And at that point, this particular grade or this particular course was so important to me that as if it's life and death. And then we thought that no big deal. I mean, I came out okay and I'm doing fine. So that's how I see the response to that, to your comment.
I'd also like to respond. I think that's a really good point. Prior to my conversion, the world was very random. Things happened, and they really didn't seem to have a lot of meaning. I really felt very buffeted by the wind, like that the lovers in the fifth canto of Dante, if you know that figure where they're just swirling around. And then these events started happening, and it became very clear to me that the world isn't random, that there is a logic, which I attribute to God, and it started to make sense. And I think that it was at that point that I began to realize that when I stop and listen and I follow, then things fall into place in the most beautiful ways imaginable. And I think that is something that strikes me. Just, it's the listening and being responsive and not directing. I mean, for example, so after my conversion, I was still on the path of being an art historian. I mean, as you can imagine, the job market for medieval art historians is not very good. It's pretty much non-existent. And so here I am after all these years of studying, feeling that, well, I'm following God because I am studying medieval art. I want to share this art with the world, finding myself with no career. And I had loved books and libraries, and I thought, well, maybe this is a possibility. I have to do something with my life, and I have student loans. And the most amazing thing, I could never have foreseen what a wonderful career I have got. It's like this wonderful gift because I stopped and listened. I began to realize, well, maybe there's a reason why I'm here. Maybe there's a reason why I'm interested in librarianship. So I think for me, it's that sense of, it wasn't like it was like it kept presenting itself to me as reasonable, even though I was kept doubting. And I think that's, for me, what was so interesting about this.
One thing I would like to add, so I feel the God's presence and see what God is in the Quran, it says the God challenges man that who do you call when you are in the dead of the night on high seas and there's a big storm comes in. At that juncture, who do you call? I mean, even the person who does not have any belief in God still asks for that higher power, that if I could get away from this, can I be saved? And so that is what God is, that God, so you remember him when you are in adverse circumstances, but you don't remember him when you are doing good. And so the challenge is that you remember God in good times so that he remembers you in bad times, in adversity.
Are there questions that people want to raise with one another? Yeah, we would love to take questions from the audience. Please begin to send them up.
Just send them to Irfan's iPad directly, if you will. We'll pass it back and forth.
Can I just read it?
No idea.
Okay. Can I read it from there? The first one we have is, do you believe that there is conflict between academia and faith? And what do you believe should be done about that conflict?
Could you repeat the first part of that? Janine, I didn't understand.
Do you believe there is conflict between academia and faith? And what do you believe should be done, if there is a conflict, about that conflict?
I'll jump in. This is one of the things that I deal with as a teacher, and I have for a long time, which is, what do I do in my class where there's a student who wants to proselytize their beliefs in my class, even though that's not what the class is about? And I have to tell you, on that issue, I'm pretty conservative. I really don't think that those kinds of comments belong in a regular classroom. People are entitled to their religious views. They're entitled to express their religious views. I don't think that's what university classrooms are for. They're not what my classrooms are for. So in that narrow sense, I would say there's sometimes a conflict, because I understand why people feel compelled to speak to their faith and to express their faith 24 hours a day. I understand that. But I think there is a conflict in the sense that the university classroom is the secular university classroom. We're not Notre Dame or something, or Brigham Young. I think in that context, there are things that don't belong within the confines of a university classroom, at least under normal circumstances. So sometimes I think there is a conflict. I feel that conflict. I want to respect the views and the voice of my students, but I don't want those things to take over my classes. Because once you start talking about that, it's very hard to talk about anything else.
Is it okay to jump in? Yeah, great. I appreciate very much what Nick just said. Let me address the question, if I might, from just a bit more fundamental perspective. I think from a basic perspective, there's not only is there no conflict between academic life and faith, I believe that faith and the Christian faith in particular has had a major impact on the way that academic life developed in the West. It's well known that Harvard, Yale, and Princeton were all founded by those who felt strongly that as the quote that I had cited earlier from in my talk, that God was responsible for the creation of the world. He is the one that is responsible for making all of us, and that the universities were established to pursue and think through what he has done. I don't know that this is widely known, but I believe it's 8 out of 10 of the original members of the Royal Society of London were Puritans. And the reason they saw no conflict whatsoever in that, in fact, quite the opposite, that their purpose in pursuing science and mine and many others today springs from the conviction that, again, the world was made by a logical God, and we have the privilege of thinking his thoughts after him. So I agree with Nick's comments that there can be moments of tension, but I think fundamentally at the most basic level of the university, it's about understanding the world that we find ourselves in, and that's perfectly consistent with the Christian faith.
So I mentioned in my comments earlier also that I do not see any conflict actually between faith and academia, and actually it is, as colleague Gary Eden said, that it's an impetus for both striving and for curiosity, for research. And then I am reminded, I would like to share that the Quranic verse that says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth manifests itself from falsehood." So basically, you lay out all the facts and let the people make the decision, whatever that is. And so that is, so you open curiosity, open exchange of views and the like. And so that is at the heart of learning. And this model has been practiced since early ages among Muslim scholars because of this motivation of that Quran time and again reminds that don't you see, don't you ponder, can you not see the turning of the night and the day and the sun and the moon and all those celestial bodies? So don't you reflect? So don't you see the life and death and how God creates you from a clot and makes you into a human being, and then you die and then you would be raised again? So this is a reflection. This is a time for pondering, and that is all part of curiosity, and that's what motivates us, both whichever discipline that we are following.
And I just want to follow up on Irfan. And also with Nick as well, I don't really see a conflict between religion and academia. It is true that in the classroom it often is that there are different views, and as someone who teaches medieval Christian art, although in the Middle Ages there is Islam and Islamic art that we talk about as well, I think it's really important to be very respectful of other opinions and to look at this art as an opening of dialogue, because it's not, I mean, not everyone in the classroom in a state institution is going to be Christian or Catholic. There's going to be a lot of different opinions, and I think it's really important to understand the subject at hand and the people, you know, as I said, the saints that I had studied earlier, to understand their world, but also to bring our world in as well and to have dialogue, but to be respectful of each other's opinions.
Related to this, someone else has asked if you have found academia, I guess Professor Birboulis began to answer this, but in general, someone is interested in whether the panelists think that being in academia has been a place that is more hostile to discussions of faith, or if your experience of being in academia is a place that is welcoming and encompassing of all of these kinds of discussions that we're having tonight.
Yeah, go ahead. You go first. Okay. So it's just a thought before it goes off. So I see that, I mean, we are a social being, and so faith or no faith is part of us. And so to take it away from a human being, you are taking it away, and you are not doing justice to it. So all of this, so faith is an integral part of academia or of a human being. Now, some would characterize that no faith is also a faith, that you are believing in something, and you have a direction that you focus on. And so that way it gives us this notion of that we are continuously engaged with our human beings, the fellows, colleagues and students in an academic setting, and that we appreciate the diversity. And so again, it said that God created us as diverse. So who are we to try to make it monolithic or uniform? So, and again, as I said, let the truth be told and let people make their decisions.
it seems to me that part of the essence of the academic world is a critical mindedness. I think in all of our fields, we're skeptics. We're questioning received truths. We're challenging or testing theories, even long-established theories. We're doubters by nature, and that's, I think, one reason why we go into academia. I think in a culture like that, it's inevitable that all beliefs are going to be questioned or challenged. I'll tell you a very brief personal story. When I got to college, I called home the day after I arrived and said, I'm coming home. I don't want to be in this place. I was being continually questioned and challenged. My religious beliefs were being questioned and challenged by people who were a lot smarter than I was. I didn't have good answers for them. I felt very uncomfortable in that environment. But I look at it in a different way now. I think that it is the nature of academia to ask tough, skeptical questions. I think religious faith can survive that. Obviously, it survived it for all my colleagues up here. But I think one can't complain about the fact that everything gets challenged. Everything gets tested in a university, including religious beliefs. And I think for people who are believers, you can come out of that with stronger beliefs and a better foundation for your beliefs. I don't think that you can make them stronger by trying to protect them from being questioned or criticized. And being in a university, you're going to get questioned and criticized from any point of view. That's the kind of institution we're part of.
Absolutely. I have to jump in enthusiastically because I could not agree with you more. I really could not agree with you more. That's really what we're about, and I would maintain that what you're suggesting is healthy, and it's what makes this such a wonderful place to be, that everything is examined, and what I mentioned earlier about the testing of theories, one of the aspects of academic life I have loved dearly is the fact that something that is true does look better the more closely it's examined. And to have very smart individuals here in Urbana and around the world looking at an idea and checking it as many different ways as we can. And the way that it works in science is that if Irfan proposes a theory and we all around the world do as many experiments as we can think of to test his theory, and it checks out in every way that we can imagine, then the only rational the only rational response to that is to accept his theory until such time as someone devises an experiment that contradicts his theory. And that examination is very healthy, Nick, and I appreciate that as being one aspect of being on this campus. It's a wonderful privilege, really.
So actually, I see, picking up on Nick's point, it has really strengthened my faith tremendously, this challenge to which the questions arise. And on the stage here, I think probably I'm the one who probably was not born in this country. And so when I see myself, I see that I have actually grown in my religion here because of exactly the kind of questions and the challenges that I have to face in terms of why I'm doing this and what is the notion, and I'm trying to question myself and go deeper into the religion, and this has actually made me a much more stronger practicing Muslim.
One of the questions that several people are raising is, to what extent do we need then a common morality, even if we're not going to all be people of religious faith, and if we are going to continue to have the belief in the academic Aristotelian call to examine everything and be searchers after the truth. If that's something that we'll all agree upon, because we all are academics, to what extent do we need a common morality to make that followed through correctly? And to what extent do we need to agree on common ethics or common moral principles to make academia function, and maybe even to make the world function? That's a composite question, so people can think about that however.
So for Islam, I mean, from a Muslim standpoint, Islamic standpoint, Islam sees Judaism and Christianity and Islam as the divinely revealed religion. So that's why you would see a lot of commonality. And for me to be a Muslim, I have to believe in the books which preceded the Quran and all the prophets coming before Prophet Muhammad. And so to do that, you would anticipate that most of the ethical and the moral standards are same from the divine source that they're coming through. And then it ends in the culmination in Islam as the book which is revealed in the Holy Quran.
I'll jump in. I see a common morality as a goal to be pursued, not as a given. I think that my view is, I think that we do seek shared moral values. Despite cultural differences and other kinds of things, I do believe that most cultures, both in the present time and in human history, have shared certain kinds of very broad similar principles, even when they express them or enact them in different ways. But I don't think it's something that can be given or taken for granted. I do think personally that's one of the things that religion does provide for people, is a basis for a belief in their moral principles and a reason to think that they're right. And obviously that can lead people to live very good lives. I look at it a slightly different way, which is that processes like communication and dialogue, the kinds of things we're all talking about, are the ways in which we partly pursue with other people a shared understanding and a shared set of values that we can come to share in common. And I think a lot of what we do in our lives, both as individuals, as nations, as cultures, is the pursuit of those common values. But it's always out there. It's just beyond our reach. It's an aspiration. It's not something that I think can be taken for granted.
I think my thoughts might be a little bit different. I'm not, I don't know if we'll have a debate, but I guess for me, it isn't that I think we should have a common shared morality. I have a Christian belief, and that's my belief. I have a sense of morality, and I want that to be respected, and I want to respect that in others, but I don't want to whitewash it into a common morality. I don't want to change it. It is what it is, and I'm a very open and loving person, but at the same time, I still have my belief systems. And so I think it's, as I spoke about earlier, a respect for each other. It's sort of where I see us meeting and not becoming a commonality.
Great questions, and the questions people text in are, I'm trying to put together in a more unified way. One question here, I don't know how the panelists want to handle it, is the ultimate goal in life to be good? If not, what is the ultimate goal in life? And I don't know how we want to handle these questions. I think what the audience is getting at in several of these questions is there a conflict between this pursuit to be good and to do good and this pursuit of the scientific method to find truth and to do research effectively? And perhaps we've sort of covered these grounds, but someone is still wondering if there's a conflict here, and I'm wondering if there's something that might still need to be said in any of these categories.
Well, I for one, wouldn't put the pursuit of, I don't think any of us would put the pursuit of truth in the scientific realm or other places and being good in conflict with each other. I think we partly want to pursue the truth and the understanding in order to live certain kinds of life. They're not opposed to each other. And you wouldn't want to sacrifice other aspects of a moral life for the sake of the pursuit of a particular answer or investigation in your field. We wouldn't want to make that, I wouldn't want to make that trade-off.
So I would say that there's a leap of faith here that this is a two-part life, and that what constitutes success is that how you conduct yourself here, which God says that He has made this earth subservient to you, so that you can use it for your day-to-day living, and be in harmony with the nature. But while you're going about doing that, you have to be cognizant of the fact that there is a door and you will go beyond that, and that will be the hereafter, and that would be your final life, and that's where you would be gauged. And so whatever good that you do here is actually contributing towards that effort, and if you do not do enough, then you are likely to reap the reward. So, for example, you would know that, some people may murder somebody and may get away with it here in this world, they did not get caught. But in the grand justice that God they will not escape that justice. And so that realization that whatever I do here, if I cheat on my test, I may be able to pass this, but even if I don't get caught, but then somebody higher up, the God, the Creator, is watching, and I will be held accountable for my deeds or misdeeds.
I'm going to make trouble here. I'm sorry. I will say that one of the things that I really don't believe anymore is that we live a good life in this world for the sake of something later. I don't question Irfan's beliefs or any of your beliefs. I don't believe that anymore. I think that we live a good life in this life because this is all we have, and because we have to live a good life in this world if we're going to live with ourselves. That's the way I look at it. And I'll say one more controversial thing, I suppose, that I do think the idea that we live a good life in this life because we will be rewarded later, I think is the wrong way to look at it. Not all religious people do look at it that way, but I think that's not the right way to look. That's not my way of looking at it.
Perhaps maybe I could jump in here. I appreciate what you're saying, Nick. It's very interesting because the very way you phrased the question, Janine, about a good life, aside from an absolute standard that is provided from some direction for me and I suspect a number of people here in this room and on the podium, that standard is provided by God. Otherwise, the very word good is one that I'm not sure what it means, that we all may define it differently. It's certainly, all of us have an innate understanding, to some extent, I would think, of what good means. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, has a wonderful discussion of this. He describes a situation where two nations are at war, and there's a double spy that is serving both sides. And he points out correctly that both sides can benefit from the services of the double spy, but both sides will despise him for what he's doing. So they both benefit, but both find his behavior contemptible. And so the very understanding of what good means, is good something that benefits me? Is it something that benefits society? And all of that becomes rather nebulous, I believe, without an understanding of what that absolute standard might be. And I agree with you that just being motivated by the hereafter is not as noble as I would like. And but I think that, from the Christian perspective, we're motivated because God has said, it's provided the example of His Son, and He says, I want you to mimic that. He is the absolute standard.
And I know that we only have room for one more question, although this sort of opens a new set of questions. Nevertheless, I have to ask it, which is, someone has noted clearly that we don't need to keep having, that Professor Reviles keeps getting put on the spot, of course, and yet we actually have different faith traditions represented here. And to what extent do people of different faith traditions feel like there actually is tension in this God, or people keep referring to God, but of course people have different faith traditions with different understandings of who God is. And to what extent is that something that people want to talk about or something that is present within, needs to come up in this discussion.
Well, I guess I will jump in here. I think, for me, as I said in my journey, I found myself feeling I had options, that I had this revelation of God, and that I thought about, well, what direction do I go in? How do I practice my love of God? And I did choose the Catholic faith because to me that felt true and it felt very comfortable, but I also realized that there are other faiths and there are other ways of understanding the world, and I'm just one little person in the universe. I am not God, and how can I feel that I can judge others? I really feel that it is to love and to respect. And just as an aside, I lived in Paris for a year while I was studying art, and the one place I went consistently when I had a moment off was to the Louvre to spend time in the Islamic art. I spent so much time there because I felt called to that art just as much as I did in the galleries for Christian art, and I felt that that art spoke to me equally. It's just that I went in a different path.
So, I'm just contemplating here. So from my Islamic standpoint, as I laid out, so there is no God but one God, and that is the message that we take. Now, each one of us make our own informed decisions to approach God, and there are, besides what I said, the divinely revealed religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, there are other religions in the world which are followed, and each one they have their own path to God. But that's where human faculties come into play. And going back to next point of each individual making their own judgment, then we would end up having 6 billion people having their own standards, and that would be something which would make this world chaotic. That doesn't mean that it is it does not have to be uniform, but then it is your standard versus my standard versus the next person's standard, and whose standards would those be?
Anyone else want to add to that? Okay, well, we've gotten to the final portion of our discussion tonight. I want to give everyone 1 or 2 minutes to sum up anything that you think you might have to add to the whole conversation as a whole.
No, I don't really have anything to add other than thank you so much for listening to me. I think you're the first people I've actually told this story to. God bless.
Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed the forum.
I want to thank you. I was looking at the audience as people were passing their questions, and people were walking up the aisle with baskets, and people were passing things down into the baskets, and it reminded me of the church offerings in my grandfather's church. So I thank you for taking me back to those wonderful memories of my childhood.
Well, I'd like to echo what my colleagues have said. The opportunities to discuss these critical issues of life are all too few. And I want to thank Janine, the other organizers of our evening, for the opportunity to do that. And thank you all for taking the time to be here. We do appreciate it.
I, of course, on behalf of the Veritas Forum, want to thank these panelists for doing such an excellent job and really speaking to one another. And thank you for being so open, and everyone for taking criticism, especially Professor Berbules, who kept getting sort of attacked. I really appreciate that.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.